I have been with my husband Harry for almost 3 years now. I love his family. His mother is sweet and caring. His father has always enjoyed talking with me and easily made me part of the family. When my husband and I were first dating, we had broken up for a few months due to some misunderstanding. However, when we got back together, his dad was the most excited to know that we had worked things out. There's just one person in my partner's family who hasn't really warmed up to me, and that's my sister in law, Sarah. She is Harry's older sister. Ever since I started dating my boyfriend, things with Sarah have always been a bit awkward. I have heard stories from other girls who've dated guys with sisters, and there's often some sort of power dynamic at play, but I had never experienced this until I started dating my husband. When Sarah was cold to me, I didn't let it bother me too much, especially because I felt like I fit right in with the rest of his family. Harry did eventually tell me as to why his sister was so possessive about him. You see, while they were growing up, their mother's health wasn't doing so well, and she was constantly in and out of hospitals. So their father was really distracted, taking care of their mother. His sister, who was older than him, felt like she was responsible for him. She would make sure he completed his assignments and would even cook for him. She would constantly tell him how she was his second mother and act like one also. She would not allow him to hang out with any girls, and he would have to ask for her permission before going out on a date. She would constantly call him and check up on him to make sure that he was okay. Sarah would also interfere in his relationships and fight with his exes, which meant a lot of girls would break up with my husband as they could not deal with his sister's nosiness. As they started growing up and their mother's health improved, Harry became more and more independent and stopped taking permission from his sister. She would constantly tell him to hang out with her, but he would refuse and go off partying with his friends. Sarah didn't like that and had even gone so far as to install a tracking app on his phone so that she could find out where he was. On one occasion, she showed up at a party that Harry had gone to with his friends. She yelled at him for not inviting her also and basically embarrassed him in front of everyone. This led to a huge fight, and this is how Harry found out about the tracking app she had installed on his phone. He told their parents everything, and Sarah was scolded because of that. When Harry first told me about all this, I thought of breaking up with him and running away from all the craziness. I mean, this wasn't normal at all. However, I loved him, and I could not judge him based on his sister's actions. I mean, he was a victim in all of this as well, so I decided to stay. However, I have been really careful around her from that day. In my husband's family, there's always been a strong tradition of gathering for family dinners every couple of weeks and for every holiday without fail. We take turns hosting these dinners, rotating between different family members' homes. It's during these gatherings that Sarah and I mostly get to interact because otherwise she never bothers to call me. I don't mind, hence, when we meet, I try to be as polite as possible. However, she tends to make comments or taunts that might seem harmless at first glance, but are actually not. For instance, after we finish eating, I usually offer to clean the dishes while my boyfriend and his father clean up the table. Sarah sometimes helps me clean the dishes if she is ever in the mood. One evening, as I stood at the sink tackling the mountain of dishes, Sarah sauntered over and remarked, "Yeah, after how much you ate during dinner, you should clean all these dishes to lose some extra calories." Now, I don't mind doing the dishes on my own, but I was really hurt by the comment. It seemed like she was fat-shaming me when I wasn't even fat to begin with. Her comment struck a nerve, and I replied back that maybe she should help me clean the dishes also because she has clearly put on some holiday weight. Now, hearing this, Sarah immediately starts to yell at me for saying such an insensitive thing. When mother-in-law, father-in-law, and Harry rushed over to check on us, she told them how shameless I was for calling her fat. I never called her fat to begin with, so I denied her accusations. In the end, she angrily left when no one came out to support her. She later texted me demanding that I apologize to her for everything, but I refused, telling her that I didn't think I said anything worth apologizing for. Ever since then, Sarah has hated me even more. She has been more and more rude to me when people are not around. When Sarah was getting married to her then boyfriend Neil, she informed everyone during a family event about how she wanted all of us to keep our Christmas dates open because she was getting married somewhere around that date. I ignored her as I had already made up my mind to not attend her wedding unless I was free that day. Later, after dinner, we were all sitting discussing trivial things when Sarah asked me loudly if I still planned on visiting my family that year. Usually every year, me and my family made a point to go on a trip together, since we all lived so far away and never got to see each other. I don't know why Sarah even asked me that because she hardly ever interacted with me. Nevertheless, I calmly replied that yes, I would be visiting my family at the end of the year. Sarah then questioned whether I planned on skipping her wedding. I assured her that attending her wedding wasn't an issue for me, but I needed to know the date in advance to coordinate with my family plans, as I only saw them once a year. However, Sarah wasn't satisfied. She raised her voice, accusing me of being selfish and claiming that this was why she had never liked me, since I always do what I want without thinking about other people. I tried to explain that I simply needed to know the date before committing, but Sarah persisted, accusing me of being ungrateful for everything her family had done for me. Her voice grew louder, and I could feel the discomfort of those around us. Attempting to defuse the situation, my mother-in-law intervened, reminding Sarah that I hadn't outright declined her invitation, and it wasn't fair to expect me to cancel long-standing plans with my family, especially when they all saw each other monthly throughout the year. Sarah was still pissed, but let it go. Later, Harry told me that what I did was very wrong and that I should drop plans with my family altogether for Sarah's wedding. I pointed out to him that I never asked him to accompany me to any family event, so he had no right to force me to attend the wedding of his sister when she clearly hates me so much. He argued back that it was my action that had made her hate me, and that I should resolve this issue with his sister, otherwise it would affect our relationship. In the end, feeling pressured and wanting to avoid further conflict, I sent Sarah a text apologizing for any misunderstanding and canceled my plans with my family. It was a difficult decision, but I hoped it would ease tensions within my partner's family. However, to my surprise, Sarah's wedding never took place that Christmas. Despite all the drama and upheaval caused by our disagreement, her marriage plans seemed to have fizzled out because of financial constraints. She had a court marriage the next year and a small reception in her backyard. I was so pissed at her that she created all this drama, and I had cancelled all my plans for nothing. Hence, I never attended her reception. Harry did insist on me attending, but I put my foot down as I had enough of his sister's drama. I also stopped going to their multiple family dinners every month. I only went for special holidays. Otherwise, I would ask Harry to go alone. He used to go, but would then come back and complain about how he was bored without me. As time passed, he also stopped attending multiple family events. I don't think it was necessarily because of me, but before he was available to his family at the drop of a hat. However, after we moved in, his priorities did change like anyone's would. His sister would call him and ask about why he wasn't attending this dinner or that event, and He would tell her how he was tired or he had too much work. However, I started hearing from some of my husband's cousins that sister-in-law had been going around telling everyone how I was to be blamed for all of this. According to her, I was stopping Harry from meeting his family when it wasn't even true. I asked Harry to clarify the situation to his sister as I didn't want to be used as a scapegoat. He agreed, and during the next family event, he took it upon himself to confront Sarah. I wasn't privy to their conversation, but from what I later heard, it erupted into a heated argument. Sarah accused me of being abusive towards Harry, claiming she had observed a pattern of narcissistic behavior in me over the years. She alleged that I was deliberately isolating Harry from his family, painting me as manipulative and controlling. When Harry defended me, telling her how I always encouraged him to participate in family events, Sarah dismissed it, saying I was just manipulative and he could not see it. She hurled insults at me, questioning my character and suggesting that Harry deserved better. Despite Harry's attempts to reason with her and defend our relationship, Sarah grew even more incensed. She berated him, accusing him of being blinded by love and unable to see how I was supposedly using him for his money and looks. The confrontation left Harry really shaken up, and he came back home to tell me that he was done with his sister altogether. For months he blocked her and didn't let mother-in-law and father-in-law guilt him into talking to her. However, things changed when we found out from relatives that sister-in-law was pregnant. Mother-in-law and father-in-law had an intervention for Harry and pleaded with him to mend things with his sister before she gave birth. Harry had no choice but to agree, and he had a few lunches with his sister after that where they talked things out. Everything was okay between them, however. She never once apologized to me for how she had talked about me. When I pointed it out to Harry, he told me to just let things go since she is going to be a mother soon and hopefully will grow up. I wish that was true. After my sister-in-law, Sarah gave birth to her son. But her neediness seemed to escalate. She began frequently calling Harry to babysit her baby. She would tell him how she and her husband needed to work to support the baby, so the least he could do as a brother was take care of his nephew. However, Harry, feeling apprehensive about looking after an infant alone, would often check in with me first. Sometimes I would agree, and we both would babysit his nephew together. But Sarah's demand for babysitting kept growing. As time passed, Sarah's reliance on us to watch her son, Van, became increasingly frequent and demanding. Whether she needed to run errands, attend appointments, or simply take a break, she would always turn to Harry to babysit. It reached a point where it seemed as though she expected him to fulfill the role of Van's father. However, Harry wasn't the only one looking after her child. It was me too, and I didn't want to give up my free time to look after a baby. It was exhausting. Hence, after a point, I started to decline to babysit. Whenever I declined, Harry would also refuse to babysit Van, much to Sarah's frustration. It's important to note here that I never told Harry that he wasn't allowed to look after his nephew, and I would in fact repeatedly urge him to step up and take responsibility without relying on me all the time. However, Harry would try to justify it by citing his lack of experience with infants as reason for his hesitation to look after his nephew all alone. I'm sure sister-in-law blamed me for this as well because she resorted to manipulation tactics. She would guilt-trip Harry by saying things like, "My kid really wants this," or "It would mean so much to so-and-so if you did this." She would also start throwing out random dates and asking if he had any plans without providing any context, attempting to trap us into agreeing to things with her. If Harry told her that we were free, she would then tell him how she had plans with her friends and would drop the kid off at our place, which meant we would be forced to babysit. When Harry and I were planning our wedding, Sarah never once called me to congratulate us on our wedding. However, during a family dinner where I was in attendance also, she demanded that Harry and I should pay for a nanny to look after her son during the event because she wanted to be able to drink and enjoy herself without having to worry about her child. Harry refused, telling her that it wasn't our responsibility to cover the cost of childcare for her son, and if she didn't want to bring him, she could make arrangements with her husband's family to look after Van. Sarah claimed that she didn't trust her husband's family enough to leave her son with them. When her husband Neil overheard that, they had an argument with Neil, telling her about how absurd she was being and that his parents would be more than willing to look after Van for that night. During a conversation with my mother-in-law about my wedding dress, I excitedly showed her some pictures. The dress was really beautiful, and it was honestly my dream dress. However, Sarah interjected with a comment about how it was all such a waste of money and boasted about how she had been smart enough to get married in court. My mother-in-law gently reminded her that she hadn't had any other choice because of her financial constraints, which is why she opted for a courthouse wedding. Sarah became defensive, insisting that she could have chosen a different venue, but decided against it since she wanted to be a good wife and not squander away her husband's money. She then turned to me, implying that not every woman could make sacrifices like she had. I calmly informed her that both Harry and I were contributing equally to the wedding expenses, so I was actually being an even better wife by not solely relying on my husband for everything. This seemed to infuriate her, and she spent the rest of the evening sulking with a childish scowl on her face. When I went to my bachelorette party with my friends in Vegas, we all had a great time and posted lots of pictures. However, Sarah later claimed to my husband that I must have hooked up with someone there because, according to her, no self-respecting woman would ever drink and party so much before their wedding, even though her own brother had also partied and got drunk in his bachelorette with his friends. During our rehearsal dinner, Sarah made it a point to tell everyone about how it was interesting that I had chosen to party so wildly before tying the knot. She told me that I could have had a more subdued bachelorette party here also instead of going to Vegas. I simply laughed off Sarah's insinuations and calmly explained to her that I enjoyed going to Vegas, and since it was my own money funding the trip, I saw no issue with indulging in some pre-wedding fun. On the morning of our wedding, as I was getting ready, my mother-in-law approached me with a worried expression. She informed me that Sarah had just sent her a photo of her dress, which turned out to be off-white and could almost pass off as a wedding dress. Seeing the picture, I felt a surge of anger rising within me. My mother-in-law explained that she had no prior knowledge of Sarah's choice of attire and even showed me messages saying that she had asked her not to wear it, but Sarah had replied that she was already on her way, so she couldn't change her outfit anymore. I don't know what would possess someone to wear an off-white dress to someone's wedding, and I knew that she was doing this knowingly. Fuming with frustration, I called Harry and asked him to handle the situation, as I didn't want to confront his sister on our wedding day. Harry intervened, and with the help of his father, they swiftly resolved the issue. Harry's father had to rush out and purchase a new dress for Sarah, insisting that she change before she would be allowed into our wedding venue. I was relieved that they handled the situation immediately. However, I never forgave her for that. During the reception, Sarah approached me and accused me of being a controlling bride, telling me how I was just jealous for making her change into a different dress. I told her that I was fed up with her gaslighting and manipulation, and that I had enough of her games. I told her that I had no interest in entertaining her childish behavior any longer. Harry also stepped in, coming to my defense and reprimanding his sister for her insensitivity on our wedding day. He pointed out how embarrassing it would have been if she had actually arrived at the wedding wearing that off-white dress. Sarah didn't expect Harry to talk this way with her, so she started to cry her crocodile tears and eventually she left the reception. Before departing, her husband Neil approached me and offered a sincere apology for everything. He told me how he had also asked Sarah to not wear the dress, but she had insisted on wearing it. This only proved my suspicion that she had wanted to jeopardize my big day. Since that day, the relationship between Sarah and me remained strained. It wasn't until my daughter Mary was born that we started to see a glimmer of hope for reconciliation. The arrival of a new family member seemed to soften Sarah's demeanor, and she apologized to me when she came to visit me at the hospital. She showed genuine interest and care towards Mary. Harry and his family were very happy that she had taken the first step in mending our relationship. I thought Sarah would have matured and grown up since I had grown tired of fighting with her also. Over time, I have encouraged my daughter to spend time with Sarah's son since they are cousins, and I want them to be close. Sarah and I sometimes even hang out so that our children can play together. We would talk about our lives and our husbands. This is how I also know that Sarah has been trying to have another child for quite some time. She has told me privately that she has always wanted a daughter so she can buy her daughter cute dresses and take her out shopping. While I understand the longing for a specific gender, I would always tell her that she can't control the gender of her baby, so she should not stress about it too much. On various occasions, I have noticed Sarah always hugging and kissing my daughter during family events. My daughter isn't as touchy-feely as others, so she gets very awkward and starts to cry. However, I never thought much about it until now. Recently, my mother fell ill and was hospitalized, leaving my father to care for her alone. Harry, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and I made plans to fly in and visit her. While they would stay for only 4 days, I would be staying there for 2 weeks to support my father and be there for my mother during her recovery. Harry would be taking care of our daughter during our absence. I wanted to take my daughter with us, but because we would be in hospital the whole day, I didn't want to expose her to the germs. I also knew that she would easily get bored, so Harry offered to ask his sister for help for the 4 days that he would be coming with me. Surprisingly, she enthusiastically agreed to look after our daughter. Before we left, I gave her a list of things my daughter was allergic to, and she assured me that everything would be okay. As we landed at our destination and waited to collect our luggage, I received a call from an unknown number. Assuming it was the hospital, I answered, but it was Child Protective Services on the line. My heart pounded in my chest as CPS demanded to know our whereabouts and why we had left our daughter in someone else's care. I explained that we were visiting my mother with my husband and had arranged for our daughter to stay with his sister. To my shock and dismay, CPS informed me that Sarah had filed a complaint against me for abandoning my child and was planning on fighting for custody in court. In a state of panic, I frantically tried to explain that this wasn't the case and that she was my husband's sister who had agreed to take care of our child because we had come to visit my sick mother. I even handed the phone to my husband in hopes of clarifying the situation. But despite our efforts to reason with CPS, it became clear that one of us needed to return immediately to address the allegations in person. Father-in-law and mother-in-law were visibly distressed witnessing our panic, and they attempted to reach out to Sarah, but she refused to answer their calls. In the end, my husband hastily booked a return flight, which he had to pay twice for since tickets were quite expensive. His parents and I remained behind to visit my mother as we were already here and had no other choice. The situation left us reeling, and I was so distressed I could not rest until my husband called me to let me know that he had Mary and that she was perfectly safe. Nothing had happened to her. I started to cry because on one hand, I was already distressed that my mother was hospitalized, and on the other hand, my sister-in-law had tried to take my child away from me. Harry's parents and I have pressed him for an explanation several times regarding why Sarah would file such a false report. My husband has reassured us that he would address all our concerns once we returned home. However, I find it difficult to remain with my mother for a week under such distress. So I've decided to fly back with my father-in-law and mother-in-law in 4 days. I'm currently overwhelmed with anger and frustration towards Sarah. I can't comprehend what could have led her to call CPS on us. I will kill her if I ever see her in front of me ever again, despite my husband's reassurances that I'll understand everything once I'm back. I can't shake the feeling that he's not taking the situation seriously enough, which only adds to my confusion and frustration. AITA for thinking what my sister-in-law did was unforgivable? Update 1. It's been 4 days since my last update, and I wanted to update that I am finally going back home today. I don't want to give away any medical details, but my mother is slowly recovering even though she is still hospitalized. Once I have confirmed that Mary is doing well, I may consider returning again depending on how things unfold with my family. I'll be sure to provide another update soon. Also, I want to address concerns regarding my husband's capability to care for our child. While he was initially tasked with babysitting his nephew when he was younger due to his sister's demands, he has since matured into a wonderful father. I have complete confidence in his ability to take care of our daughter. He cares for her attentively and treats her with the utmost love and care. Kindly don't blame my husband for this fiasco of why my sister-in-law called the CPS. For the last 4 days, father-in-law and mother-in-law have tried everything to get in touch with her and her husband, but no one is answering their calls. I don't know if that's fishy or not, but I just wanted to update that here. Update 2. I know it's been a week since I updated, and all of you have been messaging me and commenting on my posts like crazy, asking me for an update. I want you all to calm down and stop imagining the worst case scenario. First of all, my husband and kid are perfectly safe. Nothing has happened to my child, and she is her playful self as usual. Later, when we all sat down together to talk, my husband Harry explained the events that had unfolded. He revealed to us that the reason we had been unable to get in touch with her was because she was in a psychiatric hospital. We were taken aback, and mother-in-law looked concerned as Harry went on to explain more. Apparently, Sarah has become obsessed with getting a daughter, which I kind of already knew, but what I didn't know was that on the day we left Mary in her care, she saw it as an opportunity to fulfill her desire to have a daughter. Sarah planned on taking us to court and fighting for custody so she could take away our daughter. She did tell her plans to Neil, who didn't believe her at first and thought it was a joke or something, because no one in their right mind would even think something like this. However, she did file the complaint, and then Harry had to fly back home to clarify the situation with CPS. After hearing his explanation and verifying all his details, CPS firmly warned Sarah against filing false complaints in the future. Later, Harry confronted her also, as he could not believe that his own sister could have done something like this to us. It was then that Sarah started justifying her actions, telling him how she had watched me and my daughter for months, and apparently I was not a good mother since I didn't kiss or hug my kid enough. She told Harry that every child loves to be held, but that whenever she held my daughter, Mary, she would start to cry or get uncomfortable, which made Sarah believe that I was perhaps abusing my daughter in private. Harry got pissed hearing this and told his sister that her behavior wasn't normal at all and that she was starting to get too obsessed with our daughter. Sarah kept repeating how she deserved to have our daughter, so Harry pointed out how ridiculous her assumptions were and how wrong she was to call CPS on her own family without any proof. Eventually, after hours and hours of talk, Sarah broke down, admitting to Harry that she was not in the right state of mind and that she needed help. She said how she fantasized about stealing our kid away from us since she had always wanted a daughter. Even her husband Neil was shocked to learn about the extent of her struggles. In the end, Harry and Neil had a heartfelt conversation, and Neil packed a bag for Sarah so he could drive her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. This is why she has been unavailable for the past few days. Neil apologized to my father-in-law and mother-in-law for not picking up their calls, expressing his desire to clarify everything in person. Since then, Van has been staying with us for the time being. I know Neil works long hours and I don't want Van to be alone in the house, so we've welcomed him into our home to ensure he has company and support during his challenging time. Now that everything has been explained, I can understand why my sister-in-law called CPS and why my husband waited until now to explain everything. It's a lot to process, and honestly, I'm at a loss for words myself. Update 3. Wow, my post has gone viral apparently because I saw my story on a random TikTok account. I listened to all of your advice and I have talked to my husband as well. He has agreed to take a restraining order against my sister, even if she's getting treated for her mental health. I'm honestly scared of leaving my child behind and visiting my parents next week. However, my husband and in-laws have assured me that they are going to make sure that nothing happens to my child. I also feel immensely guilty that I didn't spend enough time with my parents, especially given my mother's illness. Hopefully this time I can spend some quality time with my father and be there to support and watch over my mother as she continues her recovery journey. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.